7 News Late Edition with Naomi Robson.
Soviet Foreign Minister Eduard Shevardnadze stuns his leader by announcing his resignation and warning of a looming dictatorship. And back home, the Chelmsford Hospital report lifts the veil on the darkest chapter in the history of psychiatry in this country. Good evening. And the shock resignation of Eduard Shevardnadze leads this bulletin. He announced that he's quitting in an emotional speech to the Soviet Congress of People's Deputies. We have just received this report from Faith Daniels on America's NBC Sunrise News.
He urged the delegates to vote against giving dictatorial powers to President Mikhail Gorbachev. Shevardnadze also said the reform movement is in danger, and he was being hounded by reactionaries. Ike Siemens is on the phone with us now from our Moscow bureau. Ike, did this come as much of a surprise there as it did here?
Yes, it's safe to say that it shocked everyone. An interesting note that we've just got, Gorbachev apparently met with Shevardnadze immediately after this resignation announcement, and according to the presidential spokesman, he's persuaded him to stay in the job for the time being. However, earlier this week, there had been talk of Shevardnadze moving to another position in the government, something bigger and higher to better influence the new changes here. But the way it happened today was a complete shock.
After Shevardnadze made such strong statements about giving Gorbachev too much power, why would Gorbachev want to persuade him to stay on?
Gorbachev and Shevardnadze are the closest of friends. The legend these days here is that the two of them dreamed up perestroika on a Black Sea beach several years ago. So it's not seen as a slap at Gorbachev, but it's seen as a condemnation of a group of very conservative politicians and military people who have indicated they want Gorbachev to have almost dictatorial powers.
At home, a scandal in one psychiatric hospital and the suspicion of scandal in another. In Sydney, the Chelmsford report reveals a litany of death, suicide, ill treatment and sexual abuse. The outrage tonight is more than just what's in the report. It's also over the state government's refusal to compensate victims. Jim Marr with the first of 3 reports.
$12 million and 12 volumes later, the major findings. Deep sleep therapy killed 24 people. 24 others committed suicide, sleep and shock treatment without consent, false patient records, sexual abuse and Health Commission inaction.
It was the darkest episode in the history of psychiatry in this country.
Between 1963 and 1980, 1,127 patients were given DST, a drug-induced coma lasting up to 4 weeks. It was all the brainchild of Dr. Harry Bailey, brilliant and dedicated in his younger days, but later described by witnesses as powerful and intimidating and a very, very low form of life. In one lecture, Bailey referred to New Orleans, where he said it was easy to get niggers and cats for experiments. He told one patient there were just 3 important things to do in life: eat in style, drive in style, and in style. The Commission found Bailey entered into sexual relationships with female patients, sometimes in threesomes. One of the women later committed suicide. Dr. Bailey committed suicide in 1985. The Commission finds that evidence regarding 3 of his assistants should be referred for possible prosecution. Justice Slattery found Dr. John Heron dishonest in financial matters, Dr. Ian Gardner too weak to stand up to others, Dr. John Gill prepared to lie. Justice Slattery condemns the inaction of health officials and found former Commission Chairman Dr. Rod McEwen was untruthful. From the government today vows that at Chelmsford will never happen again, but no compensation for victims and relatives. It was a private hospital.
The fact is there is no legal liability on the part of the state government.
They had a duty of care to the people of New South Wales in private hospitals. They breached that duty when complaints went into that department and they didn't follow it up.
For the survivors, memories of a horrifying therapy and of a matron's description of Dr. Harry Bailey, I thought he was a bad man who happened to have a medical degree. Jim Marr, 7 News.
The victims of the Chelmsford system now say they're victims again, this time of a system that refuses to help them. More from Felicity Moffat.
These are some of the survivors of an Australian medical disaster, victims who live with the nightmare of Chelmsford. Today they gathered outside State Parliament opposite the Macquarie Street surgery where Harry Bailey once practised. Emotions ran high as they were told there was to be no government compensation.
Who's going to help him? The government? It's the government doing for these people? These are the people they're turning their backs on.
I'm so terrified.
18 years after deep sleep therapy, Gwyneth Whitty discovered 2 metal plates had been inserted in her head.
I destroyed my children, my family, my marriage, our finances. At 28 years of age I was when I went into Dr. Bailey's horror hospital.
Joan Atkinson's husband died after waking from weeks in a drug-induced coma.
We're going to get ready and go across the sea. 1 hour later, they ring to say that he was dead. The shock was absolutely terrible.
And in Victoria, authorities are investigating several state institutions after claims of a reign of terror in a home for the intellectually disabled in the west of the state. Dean Alan Craig reports that a number of suspicious deaths are being examined.
Claims that a terror regime operated at the Pleasant Creek Training Centre and other state institutions has prompted a police investigation and an inquiry by the Law Reform Commission. Community Services Victoria regional managers met today to discuss the controversy. CSV says in order to stamp out the problem, disciplinary action against certain direct care staff and management has been pursued with unprecedented vigour over the past year.
There were a small group of very heavy people in Pleasant Creek who were able to get away with serious offences and intimidate others not to reveal what they were doing.
It's believed police investigations could reveal between 4 and 12 suspicious deaths here at the Pleasant Creek Training Centre. Detectives are also investigating allegations of sexual assault. According to CSV, the alleged cover-up of the deaths involves incomplete records of evidence, incomplete records of the events surrounding the deaths, documents removed after the coronial inquiries, and detailed reports allegedly withdrawn after threats were made to those submitting the reports. Pleasant Creek Training Centre is home to more than 100 people, some with profound intellectual and physical disabilities. The government admits those people are vulnerable to abuse.
You can get people who abuse the power they have over vulnerable people. And when that rotten apple's found, it has to be rooted out.
But CSV is confident those responsible for abuses are being weeded out.
There'll be further innovations in our management systems which will make it even tougher for people to get away with these things.
Dean Alan Craig, 7 News.
A tiny New South Wales baby has created Australian medical history by being born 2 months after his twin brother and surviving. Andrew Anderson explains.
Jonathan Martin was born last Wednesday, 12 weeks premature. Doctors at Wollongong Hospital say he's progressing well. Amazing considering 2 months ago he was given little chance of survival. In October, Rosemary Martin went into labour 5 months premature. Jonathan's twin brother was born but was too frail to survive. It was thought Jonathan would be born then and also die, but the labour stopped.
Everything went right back to normal as if it was a perfectly normal pregnancy, and that was it for another 8 weeks until number 2 turned up.
Jonathan will stay in the neonatal unit until February.
I feel tremendous. It's wonderful having him here alive.
And in Perth, another young survivor, Sarah Gillies, was released from hospital today, still showing wounds from her fall under a train last week.
Yeah, she's certainly a miracle, all right. I don't know too many others that can stop trains.
9-month-old Sarah and her parents are returning home to Victoria. Andrew Anderson, 7 News.
Late Edition News continues after the break with official confirmation that we're a healthier lot these days. Two predictions on the economy today sent conflicting signals. Paul Keating quoted the influential OECD as saying our recession is not taking us to a hard landing. But opposition leader John Hewson forecast unemployment hitting 12%. More from Laurie Wilson.
Opposition attempts to bring on a debate on the economy when Parliament resumed this morning were blocked by the government.
The country's in crisis. The government wants to go on holiday.
The opposition had its chance later in the day, though, with a censure motion against the Prime Minister.
People are crying out there, Prime Minister, for answers and for assistance and for a sense of direction from your government.
Warning that unemployment could reach 12% next year, Dr Hewson said most Australians were now running scared.
And for most, 1991 promises to be the worst year in their memory.
In response, the Prime Minister once again invoking memories of the former Fraser government.
You never in all that period had the guts, the wit, the wisdom to do what was blindingly necessary.
For Treasurer Paul Keating, the opportunity to quote from the latest OECD report, which is remarkably optimistic about Australia's economy. The OECD says it doesn't expect a hard landing, with the economy likely to avoid a significant recession and the prospect of a moderate recovery in the first part of 1991. Reassuring though that may be for Mr Keating, it's probably of little comfort to those 700,000 Australians Dr Hewson says are facing a black Christmas, out of work and unlikely to find a job in the foreseeable future. In Canberra, Laurie Wilson, 7 News.
West Australian business is on the edge of chaos tonight as the state's opposition maintains its stubborn rejection of new national company laws. John McCourt reports that unless a way is found around the impasse, Western Australia will be effectively isolated from the rest of the Australian financial community by New Year's Day.
The Australian Stock Exchange today admitted it's experiencing a major problem arising from the WA Parliament's failure to pass the Corporations Bill. The situation is so serious, the exchange has adopted a new rule which will allow it to direct the majority of stockbrokers in WA to cease trading, effectively reducing trading in Perth to a trickle. Also, because WA is the only state not covered by the new code, come January 1, no local broker will be covered by a guarantee fund designed to protect them and companies in the event of corporate failures. While the Stock Exchange Board was having urgent talks in Melbourne, criticism of the state opposition stand was flowing thick and fast in the national capital. Federal Attorney General Michael Duffy was flabbergasted.
They don't seem to realise it's a very serious situation for from a national point of view. I mean, they're carrying on like absolute nitwits.
Even Liberal Shadow Treasurer Peter Reith said the WA opposition should do an about-turn.
We don't agree with them. We believe they ought to fall in with the national proposal, and we put that very forcefully, publicly and privately.
In Perth, Liberal leader Barry McKinnon left talks this morning with State Attorney General Joe Berenson without a resolution to the crisis, saying Berenson and Duffy were pig-headed. But Mr Berenson sought and got a promise from the opposition that all their MPs will meet tomorrow to give a final yes or no to the legislation. If the opposition does do an about-face, State Parliament will be recalled next Thursday to rush the legislation through. John McCourt, 7 News.
3 leading cosmetic companies have withdrawn 12 skincare products from the Australian market because researchers say they might encourage cancer. Lena Kaniva reports that Clarins, Clinique and Shiseido have recalled a number of moisturisers and sun creams.
The voluntary recall came after a review by a Federal Health Committee found the creams and moisturisers contained the chemical uracanic acid. Tests at Sydney University have shown an increased risk of skin cancer when the acid, which is a natural moisturiser, is exposed to the sun for long periods. It suppressed the immune system in mice by 60%.
We don't need it there. Its potential hazards are great, and Australian women with our sunlight exposure, we really don't need extra hazards in terms of skin cancer risks.
After a government request, the cosmetic company Clinique recalled 2 tanning products which contain uracanic acid. The Clarins Group has withdrawn 5 sun care and tanning products, and Shiseido has recalled 5 of its moisturising creams and lotions. The Federal Bureau of Consumer Affairs says there's no need for undue alarm. However, the Cosmetics Association of Australia describes the cancer claims as irresponsible. While the federal government has reached agreement with the cosmetic industry to disclose the chemical compounds it uses, legislation will be introduced next year to force the companies to list the ingredients on the product. Lena Kaniva, 7 News.
Some good news tonight. Aussie hearts are doing fine. Tony Rankin reports that a new survey by the National Heart Foundation shows many people are now smoking less, walking more and have lower cholesterol levels.
Many Australians are saying goodbye to norm.
We're much less a nation of norms, we're much less a nation of slobs than we used to be, and more people are taking their own health into their own hands.
Nationwide, blood cholesterol levels have dropped by 3%, saving 2,000 lives every year. Far fewer Australians are smoking, and now more than half of us are walking regularly for exercise. But there are still a few sobering statistics. Many people remain overweight, many of them blue-collar workers who are dying of heart disease at twice the rate of their white-collar counterparts. The foundation attacked the New South Wales government for lagging behind the rest of Australia and allowing tobacco sponsorship of cultural and sporting events.
Why won't they get the tobacco industry off the backs of our children and sport?
But to prove they're not wowsers, on Christmas Day you are allowed that second helping of plum pudding.
Are you asking our permission? Yeah, by all means, yes. Formal decree.
Tony Rankin, 7 News.
A new inquest on 2 young men who died in outback Western Australia. That report after the break. The High Court has ordered a Perth coroner to resume his inquest on James Annetts and Simon Amos, 2 young jackaroos who perished 4 years ago in Western Australia's Great Sandy Desert. Alison Fan reports.
4 years ago to this month, 16-year-old James Annetts of Queensland and his 17-year-old friend Simon Amos of Adelaide disappeared from cattle stations in WA's northwest where they were working as jackaroos. Their bodies weren't discovered until 4 months later, lying 2 kilometres apart, one with a gunshot wound to the head. At the time, parents of the boys said they would not rest until they found out what made their sons drive off into one of the world's most desolate areas.
Well, just find out what really did happen and why they happened to be where they were.
Following their deaths, controversy flared over the role of work conditions provided by station owners hiring young jackaroos. And in 1988, an inquest into their deaths began in the Perth Coroner's Court. That inquiry came to an abrupt end when Coroner David McCann refused to hear submissions from the Annetts lawyers. A legal challenge was mounted, and today the High Court ruled that the coroner should hear those submissions before giving his finding. But the lawyers will be confined to talk only on evidence affecting the family and not on general matters at the inquest. The coroner's office has not yet set a date on when that inquest will resume. Alison Fan, 7 News.
Yesterday, George Bush seemed to be preparing his people for war in the Gulf. Today, the big question is, will his forces be prepared to fight by next month's United Nations deadline? The American Defence Secretary Dick Cheney and the Military Chief General Colin Powell were both in Saudi Arabia today, but they provided no clear answers.
Cheney and Powell said the U.S. could be ready to go to war by the January 15th deadline for Iraq's withdrawal from Kuwait. But the commanders of the U.S. military in Saudi Arabia said that some U.S. forces may not be ready by then, and some armored combat units wouldn't be ready until February. Reinforcements continue to pour into Saudi Arabia, with 160,000 troops still on the way. It will take time before they are sent to the front. Forces already deployed, however, are ready for battle. Targets for jet fighters and bombers based aboard the carrier John F. Kennedy have already been assigned. The air war, said one commander, will be won shortly after it begins.
I have never known of an adversary to be in such a disadvantageous position as he is right now.
The infantry is still being moved into position, and it is the infantry that would put the squeeze on Saddam Hussein's forces to surrender Kuwait. Those in the field train for what they fear most, a chemical attack. All soldiers make training as realistic as possible. Egyptian commandos even put on a demonstration of desert survival by eating animals, raw. But these war games will not change the face of battle. The superior army will.
I'll be back shortly with more late edition news, including the new Easy Riders. They call them Hell's Rotarians. Some hot weather across many parts of Australia today, and more heat and sunshine is predicted for tomorrow. Parts of America are now looking forward to a white Christmas, but this is what you can expect tomorrow. Once upon a time, only a socially mobile upwards Hells Angel dreamt of owning a Harley-Davidson, but how times have changed. Now Harley-Davidsons have become America's accessory of the year. High-flying American executives are queuing up to hop on a hog.
The outlawed chopper rider may be an endangered species, as guys and gals in pinstripes, corporate stiffs, take over the motorcycle market. Stockbroker Ron Dunlap has reached the age where he needs a little help reading, but not when he's ready to hit the road. Bob Gerund is poised to make millions on a revolutionary bicycle design, but when his hand grips the handlebar, he's dreaming of this bike. They're the Hells Rotarians, Bellevue, Washington's newest motorcycle gang. But these business executives are really just rubes, rich, urban bikers.
They say, oh, I can never do that. And now they still have their tie and suit and tie on, but now for the weekend they don their leather hat, their leather vest, the removable tattoos, all the biker jewelry, and for that weekend, they're someone else.
For Harley-Davidson, the only motorcycle company left in this country, rubes have been a bonanza. Harley now controls 60% of the big bike market and can't make their motorcycles fast enough.
I think these things not only have to feel right and work right, but when you're on it, it's got to ring your chime. It has to do something for your ego.
And that includes women, Harley's newest marketing target. For real bikers, the arrival of the rubes is a bit disconcerting.
I think them as wannabes. They want to be bikers. You know, they're trying to live up to something they can never be.
But the next time you run into a motorcycle gang, it may not be Hells Angels. It could be the Hells Rotarians, a bunch of rubes.
That's 7 News Late Edition on this Thursday, December 20. I'll say goodnight and you can say g'day to a mother and her new baby at Werribee Park in Melbourne's West.